let's say you have an upcoming virtual on-site coming up in 2 weeks. And since you're doing great on the technical side, all you have to do is to prepare the behaviorals. And you basically allocate the first week on the theory and the second week on the practice. So in the first 2 or 3 days, you start preparing stories, the best stories you have in your career, both your successes as well as your failures, to be as inclusive as possible. Then you start writing down a couple of answers to first the most commonly asked questions, and then you take it even one step further to start writing down answers to all 145 behavioral questions. And then after you have all this, 50 pages of documentation, then you're done with the first week, and then you start your second week with the actual role play process, where you train your ability to communicate, to convey the message that you prepared in the first week. Then probably you start in the mirror because you want to gain a little bit more confidence. You want to feel more confident while you speak to someone. And then probably you call upon a friend, to ask for their feedback. And to impress your friend and to really do a thorough preparation process, you even memorize a couple of those answers just in order to ensure that you'll be able to communicate those concisely and to the point. And maybe your friend will give you some feedback. Hey, I think you can be a little bit more convincing because I think you're speaking a bit fast and you're not all that convincing. And then you take his feedback seriously. Maybe you start memorizing a little bit more until you reach, maybe half of those 145 possible behavioral questions. And then you go to the interview. Now, while this approach, is an approach that is not as bad as not preparing at all by any means, I think this is the classical approach of over-preparing a behavioral interview. What do I mean by over-preparing? I mean preparing a lot on every possible area that you know without having a concise plan, without having any priorities. And this is the primary difference between over-preparing an interview and perfectionism in preparing an interview. Perfectionism is something you're looking for, especially while interviewing for a high-performing company. Now, if we go back to that example of those 2 weeks, the first week was allocated on theory and the second week was allocated on practice. Why? Well, the problem here is that many of you will not lack skills in both the theory, both brainstorming the stories and communicating. Most of you will be good at something, good at one and worse at the other. So the first thing you must do here is to assess, hey, am I a good speaker or not? Can I communicate? Do I feel comfortable conveying my ideas well in a job interview or any exchange for that matter? If so, then probably your best bet would be to spend time on the quality of the stories that you're preparing for. Now, in my example, if you'd be careful, in the first week I said that you'd prepare the answers for all 145 questions, the written answers. I think that's slightly overkill unless you are really bad at brainstorming for those quality stories and you're really good at speaking. So if you're a great speaker, then yes, I believe your time is well spent, even out of those 14 days, 2 weeks, to spend 10 days theorizing on what is the best possible story that I will talk about here. And yes, I said 10 days only to brainstorm for stories because that's where you get the best bang for the buck here. And only the last 4 days, to communicate those, speak in the mirror or role play with a friend. So this would be the first scenario, that usually you're a great speaker, but you need to work on the theory. The second scenario is, you're not as great of a speaker, but you're a great technical person. So you know how to theorize. You like theorizing things a lot. If you are in such a scenario, needless to say, you must get over your stories, like 2 or 3 days I said, then probably you'll spend 1 or 2 days more to polish up those stories, but you should immediately get into role play. And what I'm saying is you should immediately go into role play is to know some results, to know some benchmarks. How are you doing there? How confident do you feel about communicating those ideas? And once you do role play for a couple, 2 days, for example, then you can go back to the drawing board. Maybe your communication, maybe the way you're communicating your idea is not the best. Maybe that story is not the best because you didn't know that communicating a story that you were theorizing a lot is not probably the best story you want to talk about. But the point is that by knowing that you are not a great speaker, but you are great at theorizing things, you know that you get the best bang for the buck from practicing. So that's why, instead of spending 1 week to theorize, 1 week for practice, spend only 3 days or 4 days to theorize, and then 10 days for practice. So that's what I mean by being a perfectionist in a job interview. And this is something, that will ultimately make a difference in a job interview, because I'm not including here, the all too common scenarios where you spend countless hours researching, I don't know, for the best possible answers for some behavioral questions, or, even some people watch my YouTube videos, too many of them. But I didn't include distractions in this overall preparation process. That's why I'm saying, the time is a very valuable asset. So that's why I would very much encourage you, if you want to take the perfectionist approach in preparing for a job interview, which I believe is a good one, then to first run an assessment. Hey, what do I need to really improve on here in this process? And then give it a go, try it once and see how it goes, and then have time to loop at least one more time, if not multiple times, through this process of theorizing and then role-playing, practicing. This is what will get you, basically to perfection your behavioral interviewing skills, and basically get you ready for an intense behavioral interview.